Tyranny is on the rise. According to Freedom House, democracy has lost ground to dictatorship for the 18th straight year. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that there are few people with the courage to stand in the way. Loujain al-Hathloul is one of those people. She has been imprisoned, tortured, and nearly killed for daring to stand up for women's rights in Saudi Arabia. Her activism would test the limits of the US-Saudi alliance and expose the dark side of a kingdom often hailed as a reformer. But more than that, her story is one of unbreakable courage in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Born in 1989 in Jeddah to a prominent family, Loujain has always been a fierce advocate for women's equality in a country where the legal system is based on a strict interpretation of Islamic law, with the Quran and Sunnah forming the country's constitution. This deeply conservative framework has enshrined discrimination against women in law. Saudi women are legally subordinate to men. They have been historically banned from driving. They require a man's permission to travel or marry. They face severe restrictions in daily life. But Loujain refused to accept this status quo. Inspired by the Arab Spring uprisings and the potential for change they represented, she traveled to Canada to study French literature at the University of British Columbia. After obtaining her degree, she leveraged social media to become a leading voice for Saudi women's rights. In 2013, she bravely posted a video of herself driving in Saudi Arabia. It went viral. It was a bold act of defiance in a country that wouldn't allow women to drive until 2018. In December of 2014, Loujain was detained for 73 days after trying to drive into Saudi Arabia from the United Arab Emirates. She was arrested at the border, but it only seemed to strengthen her resolve. Undeterred, Loujain decided to run for office in the 2015 municipal elections, the first time women were allowed to vote and run as candidates in Saudi Arabia. But despite submitting her candidacy, Loujain's name was left off the ballot in retribution for her activism. But her biggest test would come in 2017, when the young Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, came to power. MBS branded himself as a reformer, trying to transform Saudi Arabia economically and socially. He did make some changes, like allowing women to drive and curtailing the powers of the religious police. But behind the scenes, MBS was brutally cracking down on dissent. Despite his rhetoric about modernization, MBS was determined to centralize power and crush opposition. Loujain, one of Saudi Arabia's most prominent women's rights activists, would become a key target in his campaign. In 2018, a private security firm named Dark Matter, working on behalf of the United Arab Emirates, used 3 former U.S. security officials to hack into Loujain's phone and monitor her activities. The hacking led to the arrest and ultimately the prolonged torture of Loujain, all while MBS was claiming to be a champion of progress. Loujain's sister Lena described her detention in a recent CNN interview.
And where she was electrocuted, she was flogged, and she even showed my parents her thighs, and they were blackened with bruises. She could barely sit because of the torture. She was sexually abused.
MBS was asked about Loujain's torture in a 2020 interview.
Her family says that she has been tortured in prison. Is that right?
If this is correct, it is very heinous. Islam forbids torture. The Saudi laws forbid torture. Human conscience forbids torture.
But Loujain's sister knows better.
And what's important to note is one of the people who was overseeing the torture is our Crown Prince MBS's right-hand man, Saud al-Qahtani.
Al-Qahtani is known for his central role in the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Loujain spent nearly 3 years in prison, much of it in solitary confinement. She was charged with undermining national security, cooperating with a foreign agent, and inciting change in the political system. In 2019, her sham trial began at the Specialized Criminal Court, a terror court known for prosecuting human rights activists in secret. International pressure mounted for her release, with Loujain becoming one of the most high-profile political prisoners in Saudi Arabia. Her case was championed by human rights groups and Western lawmakers. In 2020, she was awarded the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize, and she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 and 2020. In the United States, I'm happy to say both the Trump and Biden administrations called for her release. It was a major point of tension in U.S.-Saudi relations. Loujain's fight for justice extends beyond Saudi Arabia's borders. In 2021, she filed a lawsuit in a U.S. court against those 3 former U.S. intelligence officers who hacked her phone and revealed her location. While the court threw out her case, the U.S. government took action. The 3 officials admitted their guilt and agreed to pay a combined $1.7 million and never again seek U.S. security clearance. Loujain has been under severe restrictions since her conditional release from prison in 2021. She faces a 5-year travel ban, and if she resumes her activism, she'll go back to prison immediately. Despite the restrictions, she earned her master's degree in sociology from the Sorbonne University in Paris in 2022. Despite being silenced for the time being, Loujain remains a beacon of hope and an inspiration, not only for women's rights advocates, but for freedom fighters everywhere, hoping to stop the rising tide of tyranny.